for coming out on such a less than ideal driving conditions. And thanks Middlebury Public Access for taping it for those people that decided not to come. So I'm Mary Simmons, and there's a few of us that are part of Homes First, who's hosting this with Hannaford Career Center. And what you're first going to see is about a 20-minute film that was created from a program that I have. It takes Vermont high school and college students on road trips to explore certain issues. And the issue we did in 2019 was to learn about how people all across the country were funding and building homes for people that needed homes. And so we went from here, stopped in Ithaca, New York, Syracuse, New York, Detroit, Madison, Wisconsin, Portland, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon. And we just showcased that a little bit in this film. So yeah, enjoy the film, I guess. And then afterwards, you'll be hearing from someone who's in the film. He's like a famous person from the film. So yeah, so we'll meet Andrew and Katie afterwards. That's great. Sounds good. Diamonds or me?
It's a video.
To me. We all come from different communities in Vermont.
We joined this 15-day adventure through car and through train across the country
to learn about how people were building tiny houses for their neighbors who need homes.
A small group of citizens in Middlebury
asked us to kind of be the boots on the ground for this exploration
and bring back the knowledge of others who are doing this work all across our country.
We went across the country and we looked at the different ways people are building tiny houses
to hopefully inspire us to do something similar in Vermont.
To kind of see if it was possible to do something like that in Vermont. And sure enough, it absolutely is.
Apartment that's in Middlebury right now, I would literally have to make $27 an hour. My whole community's here, so.
This is where you live. You've lived here for 10 years.
Yeah.
If you can't find affordable housing, that means you're gonna have to leave.
Yeah.
How hard is that?
And you're like the glue of the community because you're a counselor.
Yep.
I live in a low income housing building. Where I'm at now, I pay, because I'm on a voucher, I pay $2 something. If I make $150 more, I lose all of it. Where I have to pay the full amount, which is $950 plus utilities.
What's it like trying to find affordable housing? Is that process pretty grueling?
It's a headache.
What's it like being a parent and trying to find housing?
It can be cute and fun when they're looking at the places with you, but then it can, where the stressful part comes in is when they're sleeping and all you can think about is finding them a home, forever home.
Working full-time has never really been enough. I'd say I was comfortable when I was working 140-hour bi-weekly paychecks. Yeah, it was like, I was maybe making $13.50 at that rate. So that's kind of like the availability. It's not a very good ratio of like $12-13 an hour for like $800+ a month in rent.
Yeah, so affordable housing in this country right now means that you're going to pay a third of your income to live in a building, and that normally that's matched with a voucher from the government so that the landlord is getting a fair market rent, which is okay. It causes developers to develop housing for people who otherwise couldn't live in a safe, clean, affordable place. Financially, it's a disaster, and nobody ends up owning anything, which just leaves people in poverty.
My name's Andrew. I'm the director of A Tiny Home for Good. Been doing this for the last
4 years or so. So started articulating what I just shared with you all, how the affordable housing that's out there does nothing to promote any long-term stability. Started sharing this with churches, with Rotary, anyone really who would listen. And little by little, in like $100 increments, was able to raise enough money to build our first 2 houses. I think that our average donation is $100 or less, with the majority of it coming from private contributions. Yeah, that's probably our average donation. There's a girl who donated the money she got from the Tooth Fairy. That was cute.
I don't know if this would work in every community, and I don't know if we could do it again in this community. But we sent out a fundraising letter in December of 2014, and we laid out our vision. Said this is what we would like to create. And I learned over time that there are just a lot of people out there who, when you give them the vision, and they have that kind of means, and they know that their gift is going to enable someone to be able to support themselves. It's been the easiest fundraising project.
Yeah, so they're all built by volunteers. We don't pay anything for labor, so that keeps it really economic. Like, wow, this is incredible because people love getting involved, and it breaks down the stigma. You you come out here to work, and it's like you're working along with everyone, and no one knows who anyone is, and they're all just people working towards one thing.
So we decided early on not to take government money for this. So I didn't want to promise you that in 7 years you're going to own a home and then come back and say, well, the government doesn't want to do this anymore, so you don't get to own a home.
I just started to talk to anybody that would listen. I went to the mayor of Ithaca. I went to all the meetings in town. I started talking to churches. I started talking to anybody that I could get to listen, to say, this is what we're doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that something had to be done, and I just talked to anybody that I didn't have a plan. Honestly, I did not. Yeah. I didn't have a plan. I mean, it sucks as a model, really. No, I mean, a lot of people say, well, what's your model? I don't know. I knew something had to be done. I knew I couldn't foot the bill myself, right? I mean, I put a lot of my own money into it, but I knew that I had to get help from people, and I just started to talk to people.
I know that the city helped in some way, but not on. There wasn't any discounting the actual land price. This village was entirely funded. We didn't have to take out any kind of mortgage or we didn't have any kind of debt financing, any of that. So we own it outright. But it's an incredible testament to what can happen when people come together.
Each house was different, which made it almost feel like any other block on any other street, and they were nice houses too.
It was structured like a mini neighborhood. Like there was a sidewalk, and it wound, and nothing was straight. There was no hard edges.
With that sense of community and everybody working together, and the people within the village knew each other. It's not like they were strangers to anything either.
Yeah, and the guy who created it and started it actually had his own house in the village.
What is the square footage of these homes?
It varies. The first couple we built were 248 square feet, which was too small. So now we're at a 300, a little bit over 300 per unit.
320. Yep, they're 16 by 20.
And why identical? Just ease.
Yeah, I can build them with one hand tied behind my back and one eye closed now. No, it's just easier for volunteers.
Those houses, they were cookie cutter, but they were probably the most spaced that we saw. It was homey in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that was definitely, you could tell Carmen obviously, was very passionate. He was definitely the driving force of that. And that is one thing I think we would need a lot of, is compassion.
So, what do people think about these tiny houses?
When people come into the neighborhood, they're blown away. Well, they really are different. I said, well, I've been telling you that. I don't know why you thought I'd lie about it. But of course, yes, they're different and attractive. Affordable housing doesn't have to mean ugly housing, right? It doesn't have to mean a rectangle or something you'd be embarrassed to live in. It shouldn't be. Why shouldn't there be beauty in each neighborhood? Almost every single house has a different architect, so they truly are different styles. So they're very attractive homes. They're just smaller. That's all. They're very energy efficient. They're good for the planet. They're good for the pocketbook. They're just smaller.
Oh wow.
It was like it was the first like major like artistic one. It was like every house was like incredible, and there's so much thought was going into
There's
it.
so much space.
Yeah.
And I think one thing, like the reason that was possible was obviously because it was coming from a social service organization, but also they had a lot of outreach and like a lot of social media. Like a lot of people knew about it, and as like an up and coming architect, you know, if you see a really cool like community that like is going to be getting a lot of coverage in the news later on, you might want to have your name on that. So I think one thing about Vermont would be to like
that's a great tool
get
we
it
could
out
totally
there,
utilize.
because then you can get a lot of like plans donated.
Had like a little healthy competition.
And we ended up with these 13 different architects who all donated their services. Just the number of folks who signed up to do that.
There's so many people who want to help and who can help. It's just about getting it done.
Back to the logistics. How much do they cost?
Well, we'll argue about that. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll say 15. I mean, some of them seem to be more. I don't. So what we do is take the cost of the materials and a portion of what it costs to put the water in the electric service and the sewer systems and all that, and add that to it. So roughly 15.
We average between $45,000 and $55,000 a house. You're not going to do it for free. The foundation and utilities alone is $22,000. So we build the best quality house we can without wasting money. We had to fight a little bit about that because you can do it cheaper, although it's not that much less inexpensive. And I think the trade-off for inexpensive is one I wasn't willing to make.
Does everyone love this idea?
And the only thing missing was a piece of property. And we ran in, does anybody know what NIMBY means? What does it mean? Not in my backyard. Right, so not in my backyard. We ran into this like a brick wall. And I was under the impression that the city or the county would be happy to donate us property, happy to get property back on the tax rolls, happy to, get individuals out of the shelter system. And the city and the county said, yes, we have these couple of vacant lots. Why don't you just go talk to neighbors and share about what you intend? I remember the first couple times sharing with neighbors, I would bound up onto their porches and they'd all be on board. And then I said, we're going to rent them to individuals facing homelessness. And as soon as I said that, the conversation was over. I got doors shut in my face. We had a number of community meetings where I could barely finish because people were so upset at the idea. So for a bunch of months, we were trying to, almost a full year, we were battling to get this property, these couple different properties, and the door was closed in our face. And I really considered just stopping. Anyway, so spent a good couple months looking for every single vacant property in the city of Syracuse owned by a private landlord, and just started knocking on doors asking if we could buy that land. And eventually knocked on the door of a woman who lived outside the city. She owned this, what looks like a forest of a lot just south of downtown, and just approached her, said, we are interested in buying this from you. She said, great, I don't want to pay taxes on it. Yeah, I would happily sell it to you. One of the neighbors showed up to our very first ribbon cutting. The guy who, actually, he went as far as saying he would burn down any construction progress at the very first meeting we had. And if you want to do this, we can talk about it again. This was a guy who I was afraid to be in the same room with, and just that turn I thought was really special.
I thought that the fact that Andrew was still very young for what he's doing really gives him a different understanding.
I think he comes from a place that's kind of just raw compassion, and he just had to stick with it, and he refused to give up.
I think that's kind of the same compassion that we're gonna need, is always finding a way to get things done, no matter what the obstacles are.
People are like, we don't want that here, mostly because they don't know what it could look like. They have a misunderstanding about who the homeless population actually is, because most of it's not seen. And so they imagine in their head what it'll look like, and I'll bet you 100% they don't imagine this.
I don't think they really knew what we were going to build until we built the first one. And then there's been a tremendous love fest with it. People come by every day from Detroit and from the suburbs to take selfies with them, to take videos of them. Once a year before we move people into the next round, we'll have a tour. And it's open to the larger community, and we raise money at it. You pay $100 for 2 people or $75 for one.
Yeah, like we were driving by just to see how pretty it was. Like all the houses from the outside looked beautiful and amazing. They don't have to be ugly and they don't have to be an eyesore, and they're really gorgeous.
I think she said cheap doesn't have to be ugly.
Yep. Yeah. Cheap.
You know, wanting to do affordable housing or low-income housing in a way that really gives you a sense of pride to live there. But I think for us, it became important to figure out how can we do this in a way that's really visually appealing to the neighbors and to the community as a whole, as well as the residents who live there.
What I want you to do is to know your neighbors and your neighbors to know you, so that you as the person become the asset in the neighborhood, not just the home.
What's called a limited equity co-op. So Square One owns the land, which then leases it to the co-op, and then each of the residents owns a share in the co-op. The reason that we do it that way is to assure perpetual affordability, because if they owned the house, then they could turn around and sell it at market rate.
We were the first in the country to do it, and to marry affordable housing with home ownership for people who can't qualify for a mortgage any other way. It's set up as a 7-year program. They actually rent for 7 years, and they have to participate in the program in order to gain the home, because we wanted to make sure they didn't lose it, that they were really ready for it, because we take some chances on people who don't have long-term stability. So that's the deal. They pay rent, they go to homeowners class, they work with a financial coach, they volunteer 8 hours a month for 7 years, and if they do that, then they're given the house. There's no balloon payment, there's no mortgage at all. It's just theirs. But it's a 7-year program.
I really liked how you would work to like buy your house. I really liked how you would work for
There's some incentive.
Right.
Yeah. And then you can start
form
making
something like that.
and like getting
Of
on
course.
top.
And how they said assets, it's like it's what you own it.
Bottom line, what does it take to make this happen?
A lot of people ask that question. Oh, well, you're smart. No, you know what? I really am not. And I really didn't have that much money. And I really didn't, it needed to be done. It's something that needed to be done.
Yeah, you're always going to have critics. Anytime you try something new or different or innovative, you're going to have critics. I've been here long enough to know what I thought would work, and what doesn't work, we tweak.
So a place like Middlebury, start small, and people will see okay, this works really well. This is great.
If there's a group of people willing to do it, I would tell them just to go and do it.
This can be done in any community. Yeah, you can figure out a way to do it. It's a very powerful experience. Highly recommend it. Go and do likewise.
Come on, Vermont.
Come on, Vermont.
Come on, Vermont.
Don't you want us to be able to stay here and live
And work
in our own home state?
They're all gone. It's 3 years, so I don't even know where they all are. But yeah, it's edited by Chico. So now we want to first hear from Andrew and Katie, who are from My Tiny Home from Good. So you'll probably recognize him. Here he is in flesh. So yeah, Andrew, if you could just tell us, we invited Andrew because it's great to hear someone who has done it is doing it, and is just a really inspiring person to listen to.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thanks.
Well, Katie and I, we have the privilege of getting to work on this kind of work literally every single day. So any opportunity we can take to kind of take a nice little vacation and also share about our work, God, I will take that in a heartbeat. So thank you for the opportunity for us to be here today. I won't go, I don't know, you saw that video was really, really well done. And I hadn't seen the final product yet, and that was just really, really special and inspiring. And I don't know, it just further motivates me, so thank you. I want to talk a little bit just about how I got into the work in the first place, kind of what a Tiny Home for Good is doing right now. I'll then turn it over to Katie, our Director of Development, and she'll talk a little bit about what it looks like for our work in the future. I'll have 2 quick lessons that, like, massive mistakes that a Tiny Home for Good made that I would hope that how Home First Vermont kind of could steer away from, and then turn it over to the students currently making the houses. So in 2008, I started at Lemoyne College, small school in Syracuse, New York, and fell in love with one of the homeless shelters in the area. I just started serving sandwiches there and then just couldn't leave. I can't exactly explain why, other than I met some of my still closest friends who were living there. And I started working there, and one of my jobs is to drop off the guys when they found what was hopefully going to be their permanent housing, right? So this was an emergency shelter. The idea would be for them to go and find somewhere in the community that they would stay for the rest of their lives. And almost like clockwork, those same guys would leave the shelter, and then in a matter of months, often weeks, come back to the shelter looking for a bed again. And it drove me a little crazy at first because I didn't really understand why. I didn't know why these guys who were given a rental subsidy and an ability to get out of the shelter system would want to come back. And it wasn't until I had a chance to visit what was affordable for these men that it became abundantly clear why they would rather be at the shelter system in some of the garbage apartments that were available in their price range. So one of the places that I remember like clockwork, dropped off my friend Barry there. We walked up the stairs together, had to step over broken stairs, and entered what was, we build small homes, we do. We entered a closet and dropped his stuff down. He was sharing that bath. There was a bathroom for the 10 other guys who lived on that floor, and he was paying $400 a month, which I'm not sure what that computes to here, but in Syracuse, that's an affordable apartment right there. And in a matter of hours, 4 hours later, Barry called me and said he wanted to come back. So it was like, that was one of the aha moments. And then I just started asking the guys, Barry, like what they were looking for in a house. And everyone pretty much described what you see up here. They weren't asking for like a big mansion or a Victorian or like a 5-family home. Everyone was asking for the same thing. They were asking for something that was small, that they could take care of, that they had their own bathroom, their own bedroom, and their own key. Like, the term key is something that I don't think I harp on enough. Like how important that is that they could lock their own door whenever they wanted to. They could leave and know that no one else was going to go in there. So in 2014, I went around to the dozens of service providers in the city of Syracuse that already provide services for those facing homelessness and asked if they'd be interested in trying to do this with me, to see if there was any opportunity for them to take a slice of their funding to make this thing happen. And I got the same exact answer over and over, that the risk was too high and that there just wasn't money available for the capital construction of these projects. So by that point I was like frustrated, and I was like, all right, well fine, like much like Carmen talked about, like his words are so damn true. Just like you just have to step up and someone's got to do it then. So started raising money, as I said in that video, very little by little, talking to churches, Rotary clubs, friends, family, different people who in the city of Syracuse who I know were interested in the homelessness issue. And you know, the retrospect's a beautiful thing, but I believe that process did not take as long or as painful as you might think it might take. Like people were really excited to see a young person with a passion and an idea and being able to tell why it would work. So in 2014, we had our first money, we had the organization all set in stone, and like you saw in that video, we ran into some very significant roadblocks, right? So for 2 years faced what is known as NIMBYism. I'm not sure if this group has faced any of that quite yet. Maybe I'd be curious to hear a little bit about it. But as I said in the video, was at this crossroads where we really thought about giving the money back to all of the different people who donated and kind of packing it up. But no, like I was still working at that shelter. I still knew intimately the men who were going to be moving into those houses. And was pretty sure that if I didn't do something, then they would still be at that shelter for as long as I was in Syracuse for, and probably beyond that. So we buckled down, found property that worked, and built our first 2 tiny homes in 2016. And made a ton of mistakes. Like that is just the nature of starting something new. And there is dozens of things I would have done differently in those first 2 tiny homes. But the beauty of it is that there's still 2 men who live there now who have been there since 2016. And like, perfect cannot be the enemy of the good. Like, that was an amazing project that I'm still very, very proud of. Now, since then, we have changed a lot, right? So up until 2018, I was the only staff member. We have since had the ability to welcome on 4 more full-time staffers and 2 part-time. And I've been able to build our housing inventory up to 26 units, and we currently have 11 under construction right now. So, like, I just went through 5 years in a really big hurry, because frankly, that's what it's felt like for me. Like, it is like absolutely flown by. But with each like year and each new build we've done, we've learned a little bit more. With each tenant we welcome into our house, we've learned a little bit more. And we're finally at a point now where the city and the county can look at our work and say, wow, they're really doing something special in the city of Syracuse. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie real quick, who is our Director of Development, who came on a year ago and really like changed the thinking and how we raise money right now. So I'm just going to turn it over to her real quick.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of joining Tiny Homes about a year ago, and I've known Andrew for 3 or 4 years, back when he was in full hustle mode with just him and then one other person and a bunch of volunteers. And I was brought in for development work, so to handle grant writing and fundraising and, you know, some public outreach and our marketing efforts. And it just occurred to me as I started applying to local grants and researching, you know, some bigger opportunities that Tiny Homes had never had access to before, that in order to get to the next level, in order to carry out our mission to help end homelessness in Syracuse, the goal is not to necessarily be a construction company, but to be an organization that can build homes, or at least have more homes available. And how do we do that better? How do we do that faster? How do we get the funding to go after these bigger opportunities? And it was a shift from thinking like one house at a time to, okay, how can we do, you know, 3 or 4? How can we take a whole neighborhood that might need some investment and go after this with, you know, our mission kind of at the heart of, you know, getting people off the streets. And we started having some really exciting conversations with, you know, the city and the county where we're based, and even some just like local, actually not local, national companies that have local branches who are interested in being involved and giving back in the community. And because we have this history that Andrew has built almost like by himself over the last few years, we have these 26 homes that we can refer to that have been successful, that have taken this, what is considered to be a very challenging population to house, and see that we have racked up decades, literally decades of tenancies with who we're housing, and use that as leverage to get people excited about investing in, like, oh, it's not just 2 houses on like the south side of the city where nobody wants to go. We can point at different lots throughout the city and be like, look, this is successful. Here's, you know, X tenant who's been here for 5 years after 40 years of being homeless on the street, and be able to point to, you know, how it's working. And it's just really interesting to be at this point in our development where we have this history to draw on, and people are excited about tiny homes and like what it means for the community. And yeah, I think we're starting to see some really interesting opportunities for development in the city, and we're starting to look a little bit at not just tiny homes that will always be a part of our development, but we're starting to take on some like multifamily homes that might allow us to build faster. So for the same amount of effort and a little bit more cost, we'll be able to get like 4 units up at once instead of just 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just been this like shift in perspective in how we've thought about our work. So I also have the privilege of being married to that fine woman right there. So it's like I think we're doing a good job of figuring out how to like stop talking about stuff at home. But yeah, so anyway, I want to share 2 mistakes that I've made, and that I don't know, that I wish I had learned about myself, about a tiny home for good from the jump. And the first is I kept very little data or stories or like cost numbers about our first probably half dozen houses, right? And so like when we're looking back at everything we've done, we have this big gap in our information from like this very informative time in our work. And it's something that I wish I could have gone back and had more stories about like the mistakes that we made during construction. I was able to write all those things down, or the stories about the tenants who moved in with us, and like just these things that are in my head, but I can't say with any real accuracy about them. So as you're like going through this project, like just like write everything down, report it, like it's going to be invaluable going forward. And the second, and I think the most important thing, is to keep the end user in mind always. So our first two houses were 240 square feet. They were on the south side of the city, nowhere near a grocery store. At the time, we didn't have any laundry. We now have laundry units in all of our units. There was no laundry in it. Yes, they were out of the shelter, but man, we put them in a very difficult, potentially difficult spot. And those two guys utilized the case management services that we have on staff very frequently just because we didn't build those amenities into our houses. But if you're keeping in mind the exact people who are going to be moving in there, like just thinking about going through a day, living in the house you're building, it makes a world of difference. So every house we have built since then has these different amenities that are really like game changers in keeping our tenants there long term. A little bit bigger houses, full washer and dryer, full fridges, a separation between the bedroom and the living space. It doesn't compromise, it doesn't mean we have to add a bunch of square footage, but just being very intentional who we're renting to and why we're doing it. And that's just a piece of advice that I learned through experience, and that I hope you guys can take away too. But anyway, thank you so much for the invite to be here. This has been a pleasure. That video is incredible, and yeah.
Did you have social service? You obviously, when it was just you weren't doing social service work.
I mean, I was giving rides to guys, to doctor appointments, stuff like that, but very informal, yeah. And at this point, it still is informal. We do have a case manager on staff. He's not a licensed social worker, but as I said, there's a dozen homeless service providers in the city of Syracuse who provide that case management support. So we do a lot of partnering
with them. Right?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. But
nice. I don't know if there's any questions.
Oh, sure. Any questions for Katie or I? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your work and for coming our little neck of the woods here. I had a couple questions. One, what you just said about keeping the end user in mind. I was just wondering how you ensure that. Like, are there folks? Do you have a board, and are people that rent or own these homes, are they on your board, or how do you ensure that their voices are always centered in your plans? That was one question, and then I had another question about, are you getting a lot of folks reaching out to you to know more about what you're doing, because this is like a growing movement beyond just Mary and her interest.
Yeah, maybe I can answer the first one, and Katie, you want to answer the second one? Okay. So we're what's called a community housing development organization, and that requires that a third of our board is made up of either our tenants or others who live in low-income neighborhoods. And the tenants that currently sit on our board of directors are rather vocal, which is good, which is definitely a good thing, and learn a lot from what they have to say, and I like to think that we practice it on a very regular basis. I think the other benefit of us being such a small organization is that every single one of our staff has a lot of touch points with our tenants every single day. So not only our case manager, but I'm always every day I talk to one of our tenants. Even Katie, who's working on the computer doing development, is seeing our tenants almost daily. Our construction guys are seeing our tenants almost daily. So, and there's definitely I think a risk in, as we grow, of losing that closeness. And I don't know if there's like a silver bullet to avoid losing that closeness, but I think it's important that we keep it like top of mind. So I don't know, I think that was helpful. Do you want to touch on?
Your question was if we get a lot of outreach?
Well, I'm just wondering, it seems like this is a movement that's grown, but I don't know. Is it, or are you, and you guys have been doing it for a while, so are you like now becoming the people that people go to to find out more?
I feel like we do get a lot of outreach, but it's often by people who like it as a general concept and are interested in maybe doing something similar, but are really just in that kind of like conceptual phase, like not ready to move forward towards anything. Would you say that's
Yeah, I mean,
fair?
frankly, I would say once a week we have someone reaching out through our website asking about how we do this. Many are interested in the village model. And truthfully, this might be the very first group that I've come back and spoken to after you guys have all come. I think a lot of people hear that there's not just this like very XYZ playbook to take what we did in Syracuse and implement it in like Tulsa, Oklahoma or something like that. But yeah, I think there's a real interest in it, and we're happy to share about it. I've realized though that so much of what we do is very Syracuse, not only focused but also dependent. So even Nick just talking to you about our like zoning codes and our building codes, it's like very difficult to do what we do in Syracuse in a place like Middlebury. But we're happy to speak, and it helps us also share about our mission, I think, when we talk about what we do, so that we can share with donors in a more coherent and I don't know, just more relatable way.
Yeah, I would just to add on to that, the difference between the village model and what we do, which is more scattered site housing. I would say sometimes people will reach out and assume that it's the village model, because I think that tends to be more common with tiny homes. And when they hear that we're scattered site, that is sometimes like a turnoff or like not something that they want to consider. I think it's difficult, but like you said, I think it is Syracuse specific. It makes it's just more accessible for the people that we're housing to work that way, and it's good to have them in existing communities.
For sure.
Sweet. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah, of course.
Now, we'd love to hear from the students. So, Homes First, when we can't build. So we reached out to Hanford Career Center, thinking, why not students in the area build the homes? And Nick is an amazing ally and has, brought it to fruition. So now we're going to hear from all you guys.
So my name is Nick Cantrick, and I'm the construction technology instructor at the Hannaford Career Center. And if we can pack on stage, these are the student builders who are helping build kind of the pilot project for Homes First. So we have Declan Anderson to my right here. He's a senior at Middlebury Union High School. Lucas Allen, a senior at Mount Abe, and Caden Howell, who's a senior at Virgins. We also have a fourth student in our class, Jeremiah Tinker, who's a senior at Middlebury Union, and he couldn't make it tonight. But essentially, this is my second year class. So we have two sections of construction technology. Our first years, we kind of build foundational basic building skills, get familiar with the concepts, and then this ambitious project is what we kind of take on with our second year students. And Homes First, when Mary reached out to me, a light bulb went off in my head. I think it's a really good partnership. It's a super great fit for our curriculum. It allows us to touch an entire residential construction project on a scale that we can achieve in-house. And so, yeah, we're happy that this project came along. Here's video of that's the trailer that we're currently building on, and that's our shop that Declan here is backing it into. And that's kind of where we started our project right there. And yeah, so we started in September, and we're kind of going through the process. So I asked the students today, maybe they could share something that they find valuable or cool about the project, or you know, what their thoughts are on it. And we're mostly focused on the building, but we're making more connections to the mission as well.
Well, like Nick mentioned just now, we're able to touch on pretty much every part of a residential build on a very small scale, minus, you know, the concrete work and foundation, building on a trailer. But every single aspect of a home we are touching on, and it's a manageable load. But I feel fortunate to have the opportunity through Homes First, because you guys asked us to build it. So I would accredit you with that. But you know, it's something I enjoy, and I enjoy the actual going through the motions of building. But I'm really appreciative that this is helping the community as well. And it's a community that I've grown up in and I've spent my entire life in, so it's cool to give back to that in a way that I'm able to. I know how.
Absolutely. Just to echo that, giving back to the community, but also learning skills that I can put forward in my future. I really am looking forward to getting into residential carpentry right here in Addison County. And I have a job lined up after high school to start doing some of this stuff, and just to be able to do things like this where I might not get to do it at any other site location that I might work on, but it still gives me that skill set later on that I can use.
Yeah, I just like building stuff. And it's good that we're doing it for the community. And it's a fun project because you really get to touch on everything you would do in a normal house, but a lot smaller, so it's easier.
So
Where are you guys at right now?
These are pictures of us detailing the floor system, and we're learning a lot about building science. And our focus here is on, you know, taking elements of high performance building, energy efficient building, updated codes, and trying to put them in on this scale. So we're learning, talk about Andrew learning a lot during the construction process. You know, we're learning a ton and adapting a ton. And that's part of it's kind of a really neat piece of the puzzle for us is we get to make builder decisions every day. I think they can all, sometimes we like hem and haw about what detail or how to fix this, but you know, we're learning a bunch on this project that hopefully we can build on and go forward with. So yeah, where are we at our progress, gentlemen? Or what are we seeing here?
In this part of the slideshow, this is our first wall we raised. So I don't remember when we did, what date we did that at. But we now have all of it framed in, and I don't believe, is that part of the slideshow we'll get to?
Where we are now?
I don't think I haven't taken pictures of the rafters. So.
Okay. Well, photobomb another one. We've now framed all the way around. We've got all the walls in. We've sheathed most of the walls, so it's all got this green zip system plywood. And then we've started putting rafters on. Right there at that front section is where the bathroom's going to be. We've put rafters over the bathroom and then all the way almost through the kitchen into the living room area, which will be back here at the end of the trailer. So, yeah.
It's a really unique opportunity for students who might go on to a bigger job site and maybe play a different role to be the leads. So these plans, can you grab those plans there? Thank you to Jean.
Yeah, that's what I want to say too, because Jean is you probably all know, Jean Terwilliger, if you're in the area, an architect, she created this.
So she created these plans for us, and this is what we get to reference. So the students get to really learn a really in-depth component of the puzzle here that on a typical job site, they probably wouldn't be exposed to this. So it's a really unique project beyond just swinging a hammer. And you know, it stretches our problem-solving capabilities, and yeah, again, we're always coming across little details that we need to figure out.
Absolutely. We've also hit several speed bumps on the way to where we are now. We originally weren't going to build the back section of it where the loft is going to be, back there closest to the lockers. We were going to build that at the specific height that it's supposed to be at for the loft, but with the restriction of the door height in our shop, we could only build so high for a certain amount of time until we could move it to our taller door location. So this is when we started to put the green sheathing on the outside. Oh yeah, we're great. We love taking pictures. Yeah, so I think that's where we are now. We get all the seams taped up, and then we moved it over to the bus barn where it is now.
That was Halloween. But there's been a lot that we had to adapt and overcome. It took us, 3 days to get a rafter template because we have to build within both, Middlebury and state code for height restriction, but also since this thing's on a trailer and it goes down the road, we have to build within the height restrictions that is legal for being on the road. So we were tasked with, we have our wall height and we have our final height, and we need to find that final pitch for our roof. So it took a lot of trial and error to finally get a rafter template that would fit our roof structure. So it's just been a lot of overcoming little snags like that result in quite the issue. But
this is where we're moving the trailer into the bus barn, which has the 14-foot door opening, and that's kind of where we're at now. So.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thank you, HomesFirst, for partnering with us. Thank you. Hold those up. Nice. We also wanted to put out there that we do other cool things in the carpentry shop. Hold them up so everybody can see. So we have a CNC wood router in shop, and we've learned how to program on the computer and make signs from basic fonts to little cutout inlays and maple walnut inlays. And we were proposing that if you would like a customized sign for a $100 donation to the project, we'd be happy to work with the design and see what we can come up. And if you want the maple walnut inlay, you can ooh and ah. Yeah. This is a toughie, so maybe a little bit extra on top, for that complicated. But yep. Thank you.
Yes.
So, I'm Andrea. I'm one of the people. And I'm really inspired by something that you said, Andrew, because when we first started doing this, our vision was for a village, an actual village. But part of the problem is buildable land. And but I like the idea of getting away from doing one house at a time, because I think you're right. I think that I was reticent to start this right away, and Mary and Ingrid said, we're just going to jump in. And that's actually the best part of the entrepreneurial spirit. But what we are is actually an organization that is a community-based. None of us are professionals. None of us are, we don't provide services or anything like that. We just feel like people need a place to live. They should have one. And we know that the rent eats first, no matter what, and that it's very expensive to live in Vermont. It's very expensive to live in New England. So we decided, since we can't raise wages, we would use this model to bring the cost of living down. And so I was inspired by Opportunity Village, which is the first generation of Emerald Village that you saw. And we decided that there's a lot of people that do focus on the homeless, rightfully. But there are other people who are working that have a lot of issues maintaining their housing because they're spending way more of their paycheck than they ought to be. So we wanted to build them a house that was paid for when they walked in, and the only thing they had to do was keep it running. Now, that is going to be a little bit more complicated, obviously, because land and all of that sort of thing. But I'm sorry, I'm sick and I'm trying to. Anyway, the people that are going to live in our houses, they the local that they were talking about the $27 an hour housing wage. Anyone that would come and live in one of our houses will be making less than the local housing wage wherever the house is sitting. It's a verified income, and we don't count their retirement against them because that's kind of silly. We don't provide any services though. So very much like Andrew, I think we would provide the home. We have thought about contracting a long-term lease with a social organization, a social service organization that has a housing first model, and that means that first we house people and then we worry about their issues, whatever got them to where they are. So that's who's going to live there. Where we are with this right now is we have raised enough money to fund the first half of this project, and what we're doing now is we're going to finish up this one. We already have a trailer. We weren't initially going to build these houses on trailers, but you have to pivot, and we realized that moving these houses we didn't know where this was going to go. We realized that moving it was going to be kind of a pain in the butt to keep doing it. So we decided to build our first couple of houses on a chassis, and we have three options. We will either sell it, we will either lease it to a service organization, or we will enter into a contract with a homeowner who has available space and wants to use it as an ADU on their property.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's
and then there was nothing else with that one. Okay, that was that. So that's what we're doing. Those are the three options, and we're gonna make the decision about that earlier this year. There's a group of us that we come together and kind of bounce ideas off of one another, and so I think that's who, what.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
what,
is there any questions?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
So what's the financial model?
The financial model is you donate
What do
your
you mean
time
by
and
that?
your money and
So
we build
like we
it.
heard in the film, you know, that they were, the woman from Detroit was talking about you rent for 7 years and then you own it outright.
Right,
So
right.
the goal being to build equity and simultaneously preserve the property for affordability.
In perpetuity, yeah.
What's your vision?
So Ingrid's dream is to do that, to help people have a home. And this is, you know, the thing about tiny houses is they're great. They're versatile for you. You can make them bigger, you can make them smaller, you can, 400 is 400 square feet. So we're below market rate. So if we sell it, we're selling it for cost, what it cost us to build it, and a small percentage to seed the next house. So people will either come to us, but we're not going to finance it for them. It would be somebody who there's a lot of people who make less than the housing wage that could come up with $50,000 or have a personal loan. There is really not. We're not an organization like that. We just build the house.
So if you sell it,
the person who's buying it has to qualify to be a certain income level?
Yep, the
Is
20,
there-
it's, so the, I think right now it's like the 20, it's like 2304.
And then what's to prevent
So they have to
that
make
from
less than
selling?
that.
Maybe I'll come up to, because we really have had to change our kind of plan on what this product would be, and it's kind of good to hear about the other folks who kind of started tiny house villages like this, that they also had kind of growing pains, and it really, so much of it really depends on your funders, what you can do, where you will be able to put the homes, whether we will have a tiny house village or we'll have to go one by one. So we have talked about really many different ways to do this, but I think what we all want to do is help folks who are housing compromised in one way or the other, and we just think tiny houses really is a good way to do this, and that it really can be a project that can be done in the community. So how it's really going to work out, just kind of stay tight and see what we're going to do with it. But we're kind of really dedicated to trying to give this a go.
One of the most promising things we're working on right now is the ADU. They're changing the zoning, and I'll, Gina, if you want to talk about the ADU, changing in the zoning. But ADU is a, what does it even stand for? Accessory dwelling unit, right? So it allows someone to put another, and that would increase density in Middlebury. So it would allow someone to put a tiny house in their yard and then rent it to, so we would get a contractual relationship with a landowner in Middlebury. So that's the one that seems most promising right now to us. Yeah, so there's that. We are in conversation with a few different, 3-acre spots in Middlebury. You probably can imagine which ones that maybe we'd be able to do a village. But that's, it's all these conversations that are still happening. Yeah. So if that happens, then it's like, okay, here we go. Now we're going to do a village here. Okay, let's put infrastructure in, and that's going to be the thing, and it'll be a rental. Or is it an ADU? Then that's a totally different model. So right now we're still just kind of putting our feelers out to see. Is that what you would say? Those are our two biggest
That's
options.
kind of what,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we figured out, because when I first came into this, my idea was village, and I was going to die on that mountain. That was what I wanted. And then, of course, I knew nothing about this because I was pulled into it by my heart. I knew nothing about this, and a village isn't really a possibility right now. Middlebury isn't a huge place with a lot of buildable land, but being able to pivot and stop and say, okay, we were first going to build this house on pillars, but where the heck are we going to build it? So let's put it on a chassis, because then we can store it, we can parade it, we can do whatever we want. Being able to pivot is really the thing that guides us is our value system. It is the belief that people have to have a home in order to be contributing members of society. Housing is correlated with better health in a community. It's correlated with better mental health. It's correlated with better economies, a larger labor pool. So the community always benefits from increasing. This is a way to do it quick, and it's a way to do, because right now Nick is doing a really great job. He's going to be working in the summer building other houses for us and things like that, right, Nick? You're gonna, because this is a situation. This is the beautiful part about tiny houses. We can have a collaboration with the Patricia Hannaford Center, and then there's another group of men and women at a church that they retired. They want to do something handy. They can build a house. So our job is to just create those relationships, create those collaborations, pull the financing together, and build them, and make sure that the houses go below market rate. Nobody's getting rich doing this.
Let's see. Any other questions?
And ask us anything, because we've been doing this for about 3-4 years, so we've been asked everything. Everyone is extremely sick right now, but we probably we'll remember what we've been saying for 3 years.
So who
who is like the core of the team?
Yeah.
The four of you and maybe.
So 1, 2, 3, 4.
Everybody that's here.
5.
All of us.
Nick, 6, and.
We have some people that drop in and out as they can. You know what? Anybody can contribute anything. You know, even if you show up and you give us a great idea, that's your contribution. Money isn't the only thing we need, obviously, you know that. So Jean did our plans for us.
So there's 6 people, we meet once a month. So after we get through this fundraising, it'll be in November, right? So then when we meet in December, we're gonna start talking about the application process and how are we going to work. Ingrid works at CSAC for the housing, or you're also on the Housing Coalition of Madison County. So she's just in on those conversations of who needs this and that kind of thing. So we'll be creating the, you know, how we determine who will live in this first one. That's next. So come and join us.
Do you have any? Are there any elected officials on the?
No, that's an interesting idea.
No, we don't do that.
You should.
We don't do that. No.
Oh, that's smart.
No, you
Do you
should.
have a?
Our first board member was a common councilor in the city of Syracuse who, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't exist. Like, there's a certain extent at which you need to, you know, take full advantage of those people who can pull the strings for you and like pull those strings for good. So I mean, I can feel like the tension and wanting to like sign up with someone who may have gotten there for nefarious reasons, whatever, but they're pulling strings that you guys need pulled. So I don't know, I would really encourage you to look at people who you may be friends with, who are elected officials, who could have some ties to that land that you're talking about, and see if you can get them hearing this vision, hearing about the mission, who frankly, it would help their constituents, right? Like, their constituents are the people who need to live in these houses. Like it's,
Builder's a little, yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure how it
I
works,
agree with
but
you.
yeah, but I'm not sure how the ownership of that particular land works, but I know for us, a huge boost was having people who could pull strings that I wasn't able to on our team.
Right, and it's the project, right? It's the project that gets funded. I mean, you can, if you have a good project, you know, people will come. We have like, you know, I will just say this, that Middlebury still kind of likes its single-family home model, and they're starting to, you know, as we're recognizing now, people are beginning to open up to the idea of different kinds of housing, but there's still really I think tiny houses are perceived in a lot of different ways, and so I think right now we're just trying to explain to people how they can be used. And you're right, I mean, eventually we have to go to the people who are elected. There's, you know, we can't get around that. I think we have just discussed at what point is the right time, you know, for the ask, because you know, I have to tell you, I came into this thinking, oh, we're gonna get the town to give us some land or just like lease us some land, and you know, and then the reality hits you, and you know, who knows what keeps us doing this? We're nuts, and we just really, you know, because it's a complicated process.
Yeah. It's
a really complicated process.
But you guys are doing it.
Yeah, we are. And from where we were 5 years ago when we met, I mean, Ingrid and I met in a coffee shop in 2019, and Mary showed up, or 2018, Mary showed up in January 2019. And so where we were in 2019 before the pandemic kind of slowed us down, and where we are now is incredible. It's amazing. It's a slow process though, and it's a slow process for everybody that does this, you know, any kind of building work is, you know, it's a slow process.
Unless you work 300 hours a week like Andrew did. Unless you work 300 hours a week like you did apparently.
Well, I did.
Oh, now you're somewhat civilized now?
Vacation in Vermont.
That's so true, that's so true.
You're very honest, a lot of the towns are building into their zoning. And they're actually interested in things like this for community shared services, cul-de-sacs. So I think they can find that they're a lot more open to, you know, to this type of idea.
Bristol, man, Bristol is there, like,
That's
yeah,
Bristol's
Bristol's where it's happening.
Maddie's on the Regional Planning Commission.
Okay.
Gene's an architect, so they're in on those conversations.
I'm on a development review board.
Oh, in which one?
In Salisbury.
Salisbury, oh, nice. Okay, so yeah, then you're totally familiar with this opening that's
They're
happening.
slowly but surely changing their bylaws and
Yeah.
zoning restrictions, and now with the state,
Yeah.
kind of lessen their restrictions to back to 50. But there's a lot of dialogue in the state house about all this.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so much need, so we're trying to figure it out.
I mean, the state really is asking for changes, and they're asking for different things to try, and I think why not give it a try?
Yeah, the state is definitely really opening up and realizing that the ADU model is one of the fastest way to get some additional housing units out there. So, and affordable. Yeah. So there's definitely some funding.
To tell you the difference and how far they've come, do you remember when they were looking for ideas and they sent a delegation from town to town to interview people about housing and stuff? The person who came to Middlebury mentioned that we might have to break a couple of rules in order to get a tiny house village in here. And now they're starting to change their thinking about that. So it's, I think the pandemic is just moving. I think the pandemic, unfortunately, has done for everybody in housing what all of our hard work could never have done, because so many people were affected.
Oh. Thanks for coming. If there's any other questions, or do you want to get the autographs of the students that are building?
You have to put your names on the side of the building.
I know, that would be great, of the sign.
Yes.
Who's putting that close?